So for today, we're going to talk about accessible event planning, and this is part 2 of a 2-part series. It's going to be focused on preparing and hosting an event. This could also relate to meetings, conferences, or anything that may apply. My name is Lauren O'Connor, and I'm one of the accessibility specialists within the Disability Equity Office on campus. For today's presentation, I want to start by just going over some quick Zoom webinar tips. If you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom on the Zoom toolbar to submit your questions. There is also a link where you can turn on American Sign Language interpretation. So this can be utilized by clicking first on the interpretation button and then selecting American Sign Language. And lastly, you can turn on CART transcription by selecting Show Captions. I do want to make it known that this workshop is being recorded and will be made available on ECRT's YouTube channel as soon as possible, as well as after this presentation in the days coming. I'll be providing these slides to all of the registered participants along with an anonymous survey. I really do hope that you'll take the time to complete the short survey. It helps us determine how we can best assist with your learning goals and what topics may be most applicable to do in our future webinars. For our agenda today, I want to go over various topics that relate to accessible events, as U of M is committed to fostering an inclusive environment where accessibility and the needs of individuals with disabilities are prioritized, ensuring equitable opportunities for all members of our diverse community. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk about general guidelines as it applies to the topic, event accommodations, accessibility for in-person events, further breaking that down then into physical, social, and sensory-informed spaces, accessibility for virtual or hybrid events, and then lastly, going over some of the resources and services available through the Disability Equity Office. Before I get into the content for today, I do want to encourage anyone who is interested to please engage. We're modeling a safe, comfortable, inclusive, and brave space, so questions are encouraged. We're all learning together. We don't know what we don't know, so consider today an opportunity for growth and learning. It's very likely that if you have a question, somebody else who's attending does too, so feel free to submit those and respect the experiences of others as we all learn together today. We do have moderators who will also be answering questions throughout, and I'll save some time at the end for Q&A if there are any remaining questions. Before going into the topics that I discussed on the agenda, I do want to do a brief overview of the Accessible Event Planning Part 1 that I facilitated on a past date. So the previous workshop in this series is not a prerequisite to this one. They do cover different topics. But the first one emphasized accessible digital marketing and alt text. So it was more of that preparatory and planning of an event when you're considering those initial phases of whether it's an event, a conference, or a meeting, those initial considerations. If you are interested in learning that content and watching it, I do have it linked here as it's available from the recording on the day that that presentation was provided. On the right side of this slide, I did include the agenda from it. I discussed digital accessibility, effective alt texts for digital images, alt text that would be used in social media and marketing materials for events. We did do an alt text interactive activity. There will not be an interactive activity for today's presentation. And then lastly was just an overall summary on planning accessible events. So in summary, the focus of the past presentation was, again, more on those preparatory items that should be considered in advance when planning an accessible event. Whereas today's focus will be more on maintaining that accessibility and carrying it through as the event or meeting date arrives. So getting into that content, our general guidelines. So access changes the environment. We have an image here. If you've attended some of our workshops, or you may have seen this in other spaces, the curb cut effect. So this shows how access reduces the need for modifications or accommodations. To the left, we have an image that shows an individual who is walking and an individual who's utilizing a wheelchair to go from the sidewalk to the street using a curb cut. It says on here, when we design for disabilities, we make things better for everyone. Within the image, it also shows somebody pushing a dolly, somebody pushing a stroller, someone with a rolling luggage, a bicycle, and that access of the curb cut provides improved accessibility for everybody, whether they had a disability or not. So access reduces or removes structural access barriers. It tends to benefit everyone. It's proactive. And it's an aspect of inclusivity. So we want to consider, if we're planning a meeting or event, how can we create it as accessible as possible for anyone who may be participating? When we make something initially accessible to as many people as possible, that allows us to anticipate diverse needs, and it helps to save time and expenses. What accessibility is it's an ongoing and intentional process. It allows us to create an equivalent real-world user experience for all, and it's innovative. So to the right, there's another image here. It's another popular one that you may have come across. It shows 3 individuals who are trying to watch a soccer game. The first photo on the top left says equality. This is the assumption that everybody benefits from the same supports, equal treatment. So all 3 individuals were given the same size box. 2 individuals are able to see over the barrier, 1 individual is not. On the top right, we have equity. This is everyone gets the supports that they need, thus producing equity. So 1 individual does not have a box, the middle individual has 1, and the person on the right has 2, so that they're all able to see over the threshold to the same height. The bottom image is accessibility. And this is where all 3 people can see the game without supports or accommodations because the cause of inequity was removed. It was addressed. That barrier is gone and the fence is now a chain link that you can see through. So we're going to talk about some of these considerations and ways to incorporate accessibility when having a meeting, a conference, or an event. Some key considerations for that, I'm going to explain further in upcoming sections, but there are things like considering the accessible location. So that initial planning, making sure that the space is accessible. Can we have hybrid offerings for our meetings if they're in person, or is it going to be only by accommodation request? Making sure that we're considering not just the physical space of accessibility, but things like our technology. What audio and visual tech do we have available to make sure that if somebody's attending in person versus remotely, that they're able to access that same information? For this, we want to ensure that we have equitable staffing needs available so that if somebody has accommodations, we are fulfilling them. We want to make sure those events are successful and we're providing the things that we have assured participants they have access to. And then making sure that, as I discussed a little bit more in that first half, that our marketing and communication materials are also accessible so that people get that same information. They know what to expect, where to go, how long the event's going to be. As I said earlier, part 1 of the series talked more about that planning and preparation of items that a meeting or event host would do days, weeks, or months in advance. But I do want to really emphasize the importance of the content on this slide. It wasn't discussed in our last part 1 section, but the date, the time, and the location of your event or meeting can largely impact the audience and overall experience for your guests. So I have listed here date, time, and location and some breakdowns. So whether your event is in person, virtual, or hybrid, you do want to be considerate of your selections. For the date, for example, we want to avoid conflicts with major cultural and religious holidays. For the time of the event, we have to consider, are we going to host it in the morning, afternoon, evening? Also, how long is the event going to be? Sometimes there are events that are held in the middle of the day. This may provide caregivers and individuals with chronic disabilities more flexibility to attend. If you're hosting a longer event, be sure to consider if you're going to include structured breaks so that people have the opportunity to kind of regroup and come back to the content if it's a little bit longer. And then the location. So considering if it's in person, we want to make sure that that space is physically accessible. If it's virtual, we want to really make sure that we're attending to that digital accessibility, the locations of where microphones are, where video cameras are pointed, and that webinar tools are accessible for all users. So we'll cover more details of the in-person, virtual, and hybrid events in the next few sections. And just one more little wrap up about some of those preparatory activities or preparatory tasks for our events and meetings. We want to ensure that the advertising and marketing materials are accessible. If you want to learn more about this in more detail, I'd really encourage you to go back and watch part 1 of this series. But we want to make sure that the handouts, presentations, and any infographic that's included is accessible. We want to strive for simplicity and have good readability, write in plain language. So for example, if you're using acronyms, be sure to write out the meaning of each letter, explain jargon if it's specific to your department, or if there are any complex terms that people might not be familiar with. Include large text with high color contrast, and then making sure that we do have materials available before the event for people to review in advance, during, and after to review. In this next section, I'm going to talk about various accommodations that may be requested for an in-person, hybrid, or virtual meeting or event. So meetings or events hosted at U of M are required to provide equitable access to people with disabilities. Equitable access is required by laws and regulations that apply to the university, and this includes meeting digital accessibility standards, and when necessary, providing accommodations to people with disabilities who need them and request them. Keep in mind that many accommodations are free and do not have corresponding costs, which we'll talk more in detail about that in a later slide. But for our meeting and event accommodations, it's really important to include language regarding what accommodations are already provided in the RSVP. This allows people to plan and prepare themselves accordingly, and also know what they may need to specifically ask for and request. You want to detail the event activities. So provide individuals with an agenda that breaks down what the day is going to look like, and whether there will also be phone and video access options depending on how they plan to attend. You also want to factor in the costs of captioning, if you're going to include sign language interpretation, and what the other requested accommodations may be into your planning budget. The costs are dependent on the duration of your event, whom the vendor is, the notice that's given to the service provider, and then the range of those accommodations needed. As you send out the invitation or registration for your meeting, workshop, event, we would encourage that you use the following language to ensure that individuals know how to contact the training organizer if they anticipate that there are accommodations needed. So quoted at the top is, if you need disability-related accommodations to participate in this program or event, please contact. And then you would include the individual's name or their unit or department they're in, and then including their phone number or email, whatever their preferred communication is. Early requests are strongly encouraged to allow sufficient time to meet your access needs. It's important that that person is identified and that they are regularly checking and following up on those requests for the success of the event. You can also include something like, due to the availability and scheduling needs, please allow at least 2 weeks notice for requests for communication access real-time, translation, which is CART, services, or an American Sign Language interpreter. So making people aware of the timeline so that the event host can plan and prep accordingly. An accommodation statement provides a space for participants to let the event planner know what resources they need to fully participate. So if they read through the accommodations that are already included and they need something outside of that, you want to make sure that they have access to requesting that. So when you're advertising or inviting people to your event, be sure to include an accessibility and accommodation statement. So on this slide, it goes over how to create one of those. You want to make sure that the accommodation statement communicates your commitment to creating an accessible meeting, event, whatever it may be, that it provides basic details about the event format and accessibility features, and tells people who to request accommodations from so that they know who they would be following up with. An example is, please let us know how we can ensure that this event is accessible to you. The Zoom webinar will include auto captions. What accommodation or access needs can we help to facilitate? As I said earlier, it's really important to follow up with requesters so that they know if and how their requests will be honored at the time of the event or meeting. You want to be prepared to work with individuals on arranging accommodations, as it is the event organizer's responsibility to make sure the accommodations are effective. An example of an accommodation that may be requested or a service that can be provided if you're familiar with the needs of your audience is American Sign Language, like we have today. Please note that this service, as well as CART, which I'll talk about on the next few slides, may have a cost associated. American Sign Language is a visual language that uses hand shapes, locations, movements, palm orientations, and non-manual language signs, such as facial expressions and body posture to convey meaning. As you may see if you have Katrina pinned and you're able to watch American Sign Language during today's presentation. It is the primary language of many deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Communication access real-time translation is CART. So CART captioning is a real-time captioning service where a captioner listens to an event, like a meeting, lecture, or today's webinar, and immediately displays the spoken words as text. CART provides a full text and transcription of the event in real time for viewers. If you're interested in learning more about CART and what it is, I have linked here what is real-time captioning, as well as in the speaker notes, I've included more information where you can see the National Association of the Deaf discussion of CART. So CART is another service that may be requested as an accommodation or that you may want to consider when you're hosting an event. A CART operator does not necessarily need to be on site at your event to provide these services. If you have a room that's already set up with the proper technology, you can utilize remote captioning in CART if the captioner does have access to the audio from the event and that there is a CART screen at the event for viewers to be able to watch the captioning. I've also linked to your live captioning matrix if you did want to view a comparison of different service capabilities that are available. Now, if you're considering ASL and CART, you want to make sure that you have some considerations in advance. One of them is preparation time. So if you're going to ask one of these individuals to provide a service at your event, you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to review the event agenda, the presentations or materials in advance, that they have the opportunity to get themselves acclimated with potential content that will be discussed, phrases, names of individuals, or acronyms. It may give them the opportunity also to watch previous recordings of the speaker so that they can anticipate the cadence of how somebody speaks, speech patterns, etc. Their services also include then the setup time and the actual time of the event. There are additional fees to have a transcript of the captioning done, which is edited by reviewing the audio of the event. So you want to provide as much advanced information about the event as soon as possible to those service providers. And then there are some differences as well with closed captions. So there's closed captioning and there are subtitles. And although they are often used interchangeably, there are some differences. On the left, we have two images. The top one displays English closed captions, which include additional context and information, such as a tone, like it indicates that somebody's whispering the words "thank you" in that image. Whereas the bottom icon is of subtitles, which simply display the words that are being stated. So with closed captions, these are an option of something you can provide to help your event be more accessible. Closed captions are a textual representation of the audio within a media file. They assume that the viewer cannot hear and will be relying on reading the words. They're often dictated with a closed caption or a CC icon on video players and remotes. And closed caption, like I said earlier, include those non-speech elements such as whispers. These are the sounds or speaker identifications. Alternatively, subtitles are here for hearing viewers who don't understand the language of the audio. Their purpose is to translate the spoken audio into the viewer's language, and subtitles do not include those non-speech elements. So in that bottom left photo where it has subtitles, it says gracias. So it's in a different language to help with that interpretation. So now that we've covered event preparation, general accessibility guidelines, and some of the accommodations that hosts will want to plan for, I want to talk more and focus on ways that we can increase the accessibility for an in-person event specifically. So in part one of the accessible event planning webinars, we discussed preparation for the event. As I stated earlier, this included selecting an accessible location. It's really pertinent to have adequate staffing to ensure that there is success with the event. This allows for events to run smoothly and to ensure that accommodation needs are met. So now I really want to focus more on the day of the event rather than the preparation. So all of the planning work and preparation is done. You now want to visualize what it may look like accessing a meeting or event from start to finish. So we're going to take a moment to talk about it as if you wake up, you're going to that event today. You want to begin an event considering from the very start. So attendees are often checking in at a registration table or signing into an attendance form at that very beginning. So for event registration and check-in, you want to consider providing resources right at the get-go, providing expectations and reminders so that the attendees can plan accordingly for their own needs throughout your meeting or conference. This could include things like the location of designated rooms, such as a restroom, a lactation room, if there's a low sensory room available so that people know about these resources, if there are accessible routes if they needed to depart from a certain area, what the event timeline looks like, including if there are going to be breaks that are already scheduled, as well as any agenda for the event. It may also be helpful to provide this information in a physical folder so that people can take it with them and review it throughout the event, a digital packet that they can pull up on a laptop or their phone, or by a QR code that's compatible with a screen reader so that we can increase the access of this information so that individuals attending can access it from a variety of different ways and at different times throughout the meeting, conference, or event. It's also helpful to have proper signage at your event. As people arrive, they want to know where to go. They want to feel comfortable with knowing what routes they're accessing, where the event's at, where the break rooms are, and having notifications of it. So it's really helpful to include things such as name tags. So if somebody has questions, they know who to go to ask their questions. Make sure that when you're providing name tags to your team members, that they have accessible font styles, sizes, and colors. We want to make sure that there is appropriate contrast so that individuals with low vision are able to read the names on them. It can be helpful to include things such as pronouns and phonetics of names, and even utilizing color communication badges. And I've linked a description on what that is here on the slide, but this allows participants to indicate their communication preferences through colors. So whether there's somebody who needs interpretation, or if there's somebody that prefers something in writing, it's going to communicate what that preference or need is. Your signage, like I said, people are going to want to know where they're going, what room the event's in. They're not going to want to be scurrying around and looking for it. We want it to be obvious, apparent, and accessible. So we want to provide visible signage that include instructions and appropriate wayfinding. It's also very helpful to include this at multiple entrances. So we don't want to make an assumption that everybody's going to go through that front main door. There may be alternative routes or accessible routes that are near parking lots that event hosts may not utilize themselves, but those attending may have to utilize those routes or may have a preference to it. We want to make sure that no matter where somebody's entering, they have the same access and knowledge of where the event is being held and how to get there. And then lastly, including some reminders. So before a meeting, if you're hosting one or an event, send multiple reminders that include the description of the layout of the room or space, what parking is available and nearby, what restrooms are available within the facility, again, so people have the opportunity to prepare and plan themselves and for their needs. Further on those in-person events. So there are some times we have staff meetings that have food, or we attend conferences that include a luncheon. We want to ensure that ingredients are clearly labeled for all of these for all of these events and circumstances. Making sure that we're using large print in either individually packaged foods or we're offering in a way that is avoiding cross-contamination. Please be sure to provide water and make straws available for varying needs. We want to have options to hold beverages rather than just glass or ceramic. So making sure that we have things maybe like a styrofoam coffee cup or mug or something that is available that based off of people's maybe sensory or physical needs, they're able to adapt and select based off of their needs. Also, consider avoiding common food allergens. Peanuts are a large one. This is especially important in spaces where there is going to be potential for cross-contamination and where there are a number of people accessing the food. We want to make sure that we are listing any allergens that are in the food, as well as any possible factory exposure to them. So a lot of times on an ingredient list, it will also say produced in a factory that processes tree nuts. We want to make sure that we're including that information rather than just the allergens that are listed in the ingredients. When possible, provide a range of food for the individuals attending. This could be things like having vegan or vegetarian options, gluten-free, lactose-free, or kosher and halal options. In the speaker notes, I've also included some links for kosher and halal resources that are available specifically with U of M. So there are some options if you are hosting an event here on campus and you wanted to consider that, please feel free to check out those links. Another consideration for these in-person events is personal assistance and safety. I know I've been talking about this all throughout and I'm trying to really get this point home, but if people are requesting accommodations, ensure that you're designating a staff who can offer assistance with fulfilling those accommodations, whether they're helping with navigation, fulfilling the disability-related accommodations, or if they're assisting with putting out the food and doing their best to help with the setup, making sure that they are keeping proper labels and avoiding that cross-contamination. Identify these individuals with those name tags. Provide them with plain, large printed name tags and encourage them to verbally offer help so that people aren't just having to seek them out and wonder who's responsible for that information. The more that we make it clear and accessible and available, the less people are having to seek out our resources and wonder where the help that they may need is at an event. We also want to ensure that there are emergency plans in place. Although we hope that this never happens for your meeting or event, it's really important to include the locations of exits, a protocol for people with limited mobility and other disabilities, and where the nearest area of rescue assistance is. To help with planning for these emergency protocols, you can contact the Division of Public Safety and Security, DPSS, on campus. And I have their department linked on this slide as well as their phone number so that you can be in touch with them for any additional considerations they may have. When considering our physical space, we also want to look for our in-person events, we want to look at the physical space, social environments, and sensory informed spaces. So creating an intentionally welcome environment for all employees or attendees of a meeting, whether it be a meeting or conference, it means having options available and embracing differences in how individuals operate. So offering different types of spaces with intention. Can we have low stimulation and quiet areas for individuals who require that? Or having larger areas of more sound and movement for those who thrive in those environments. So we want to consider the impact of senses at our meetings and events. The sight, the smell, the feel, the sound. As an event organizer, trying to help encourage avoiding strong, harsh, or unnatural fragrances when possible, as this could trigger symptoms and exacerbate it for some individuals who then may not be able to access the event in the way that they had initially planned. If you're able to provide alternative lighting options or dimmable lights, some individuals are going to be able to see better when there are brighter lights if they have a low vision impairment, whereas for others, a bright light may trigger or exacerbate a migraine. So having the option to be able to dim it and help meet the needs of those who are attending and relaying their needs is really important. And then offering different types of spaces with intention, such as relaxation rooms or low stimulation rooms that people can retreat to if they need a break from the planned agenda. Physical accessibility refers to the design and layout of buildings, environments, or products that make them usable for people with disabilities, particularly those with motor and mobility impairments. These are things like ramps, wide doorways, elevators, accessible restrooms, and clear pathways, which are all crucial for ensuring ease of movement and access when we're hosting a meeting or event. Providing variability, just like with our sensory informed spaces, is a standard. This helps to increase the access needs for individuals. Ask for and offer individual preferences when possible, and doing so through that accommodation process can be helpful to identify what a specific need is. And then, similar to the lighting example, provide various ergonomic seating or comfortable seating options. It's a pretty easy approach to increasing accessibility for events when we're looking at those seating options. So there might be some individuals that require a lower seating option. Individuals may benefit from a higher height if descending is difficult. A rolling chair may allow individuals the movement they need to assist with focus, but it could also decrease the safety needs for those who are maybe transferring to that chair from a mobility device if there aren't locks. So we want to consider having options available so that people can identify what is best suited for their needs. And then language for food allergens. So earlier I was talking about for in-person events, there may be times where a luncheon is provided or snacks. If you're going to be providing that food, we want to include language similar to our accommodations and accessibility statements. So if you have dietary restrictions or allergies, please contact and include the name, host, and department, add a phone number or email so that they know who to go to. And then these social accessibility and informed spaces. We want to provide variability as a standard. This increases access for differing needs. So consider different styles in communication. If we're having a meeting, that could look like providing an agenda in advance, verbally relaying the information to our department, but also maybe having closed captions where someone can read, or having the agenda available in writing where they can reference it throughout. Maybe sending an email after with a recap so that somebody can reflect on that information afterwards. If meetings or events are going to be long or having several back-to-back, say we're at a conference and there are a number of presenters, look at ways that you can build in breaks so that people have the opportunity to take a moment to reflect and transition between these, and also mitigate any symptoms if they have them. And as I said on the previous slides, ask for and offer individual preferences when possible. For other communication recommendations, we want to avoid idioms within our social aspect. Pausing when we ask questions. This one can be difficult. It's encouraged to silently and slowly count to 10 so that people have the opportunity to process that information and respond. Paying attention to what people say versus their facial expression or tone. And again, making sure that we're asking individuals about their communication preferences. So an example I like to give is for communication is, say you're in a hallway, you're walking by from a meeting and a drive-by conversation occurs. Somebody might ask you to complete 3 tasks. For somebody who processes best through auditory information, that might be successful. For somebody who does better with written directions and the ability to read those instructions to retain the information, they might do better with an email rather than a quick conversation in passing. If you're not sure what their preference is, look at a way of providing both modalities. So maybe you have that quick conversation after the meeting, but also do a follow-up email to ensure that there's recall, carryover, and accurate interpretation of the information that was relayed. So now switching over from our in-person events and looking more at the virtual and or hybrid event accessibility. So similar to the last area covered in this presentation, I'm going to emphasize more of the digital accessibility component for this. As an event host, you really want to make sure that you're prioritizing your meeting or event accessibility to all participants by choosing the right tools and learning the best practices. Different meeting platforms or conference platforms all have different accessibility features. For all of these, you have to take the right actions to plan for them and make sure that you're fulfilling and carrying out an accessible meeting. I have various resources linked throughout this presentation, as well as at the end on a slide to help provide platform-specific guidance if you have questions related to specific items. So if you're hosting an in-person event, we just talked about all of those accessibility kind of guidelines and recommendations. But if you're hosting one in person, please consider ways that it can also be provided in a virtual format for individuals who are unable to attend for whatever that reason may be. And when you're doing so, prioritize digital accessibility needs when you are providing that virtual option. If you're offering a remote or a hybrid event, make sure that you consider reviewing the University of Michigan's ITS link that I have at the top of this slide, which prioritizes information all about hosting accessible remote events. ITS also offers various self-paced trainings that will help viewers learn about many accessibility topics that may be applicable to their meeting or event. I have some of their trainings linked here. They have ones on event and meeting accessibility, form and survey accessibility, if you're incorporating that into your presentation style, as well as information on Google Forms accessibility best practices. So if you're sending out calendar invitations for a remote or virtual event, you want to make sure that you're including the following information for your guests. So having a meeting link and a login code. Sometimes a link works for other individuals, and there are times where others have to type in that information, the ID and a passcode. We want to have alternative options available for signing in. So making sure that we're also providing information for calling rather than video conferencing. Provide the agenda in advance and expected outcomes, what the format of the event is going to look like, the anticipated duration. As I stated multiple times already, if there are breaks, make sure those are indicated so people can plan accordingly. Any presentation materials that you'll be providing, accessibility information so people can plan or request accommodations if necessary. And then if the event's going to be interactive, allow attendees to send questions and comments in advance and let them know that it's going to be interactive. Like I said at the start of today's presentation will not be interactive, but in the last part 1, we did have an activity and I made a note of it in the agenda so people were aware of that in advance. With accessibility information, you want to provide that point of contact for the person in charge if there are any access needs questions. Consider creating a backup communication plan in case that individual has difficulty connecting with attendees on the day of the event. For example, it can be helpful to plan to record the presentation and share it afterwards, just like today's presentation, in case somebody logged in and they're having difficulty connecting or their audio isn't working. You want to make sure that they still have access to review that and receive that information later in time. Other considerations prior to a hybrid or virtual event include considering how those off-site participants can be seen, heard, or otherwise participate. So if there is an event where a number of people are participating all within a certain area and they're in the same physical space, but maybe somebody else is zooming in, we want to make sure they have equitable access and they can hear the presenter and they're receiving the same information. To do that, it's important to arrange the space in a way that the speakers are near a central point that's going to pick up the audio and video appropriately. To help with this, I'd recommend consulting with Information Technology Services or ITS, Audio Visual Services, otherwise known as AV services, and facilities teams to check if the space has the appropriate resources for offsite or remote participation. That's going to make sure that you have a successful meeting or event and that it's accessible to everyone no matter how they're participating. With that, you may also want to consider voice amplification devices, such as a microphone or a lapel mic that can clip onto somebody's clothing. This is really helpful for when you have a larger space and individuals are further away from the speaker, if there's more audio bouncing around, or if people are virtually attending. It's also recommended that presenters or hosts of a virtual meeting avoid using a whiteboard or a large poster board to write notes. It can be difficult for those who are attending remotely to be able to read and see what that is. So consider using a Google Doc to take notes. You can share it then with those who are in person and present with you, as well as the offsite participants. So it increases collaboration and accessibility to make sure everyone has similar access to that information. And I started talking about microphones a little bit, so really encourage all speakers to use one, even if they don't think they need it. I always assume that I have a voice that carries and I can project, but just because I hear that and individuals maybe in the front rows may feel that way, it could be that somebody has a hearing need that I'm not aware of. So we want to consider, if I'm giving a presentation at a conference, that I'm meeting the needs of those individuals. So avoid asking participants at the beginning if they can hear you without using the microphone. Just utilize that best practice and use it consistently. Have that resource available. You want to ensure also that there are plenty of microphones or lapel mics for speakers if there's a Q&A section. So if there is an in-person component, it may be that a microphone's being passed around so anyone who has a question can state their question so that those who are at home are still able to hear the question. If they ask a question without a microphone, it's going to be best practice for the presenter to repeat that into the microphone so that those who are attending remotely still are able to hear the same questions as if they were in the room. You want to please take care to use the microphone correctly by holding it close to your mouth and speaking clearly and slowly. Microphones can take practice sometimes so that it is not too loud or abrasive and that it's not too close to another form of technology that creates that crackling sound. So this isn't just helpful for the people who are at the event or attending remotely, but use of microphones is also helpful for captioners and, again, those participating remotely. I do have a resource also linked in the presenter notes here, and it's that the suggested microphone for events would be a snowball microphone is what it's called. It's a small to medium size that helps for meetings. It plugs into a laptop by USB and it picks up sound pretty well. And then ways to increase that access for remote participation. I've been talking a lot about making sure people have access to video, phone connectivity, audio. We want to make sure that with video access, if somebody's going to be presenting and people are attending remotely, that they have a good quality webcam available and that it's placed at eye level. It shouldn't be mounted or located on a high mount or a random corner. We also don't want to rely on webcam microphones for larger meetings and events. Zoom and Google Hangout are common options for this, and I have both of them linked here so that if anybody wanted to check into their specific platforms, each option has their own accessibility features. Zoom is often more preferred. As I stated earlier, some individuals may not attend virtually through a video access. They may want to call in through their phones. So you want to test the phone before the meeting, make sure that it is accessible for people to log in that way. Or if you are going to be logging in as a team member for an event, making sure that you consider getting a microphone so that everyone can still be heard, even if you're going through a phone access. Consider the location and acoustics of the phone as well, including the microphone. So we want to make sure that laptops aren't blocking the speaker or conference phone so that everybody can pick up the audio appropriately. So again, we're going back to that visualization. So you've sent out your invites in advance. You've already received and planned for accommodations. So now it's the day of the event. People are getting ready at registration. We want to make sure that there are some things we do beforehand. So do a practice run and test your technology features first. You want to make sure that they are accessible and running properly. Hosts and presenters should be at the event early, or if they're attending virtually, they should log in early, open any applicable documents that they'll be using and sharing, and close any other unrelated tab, window, or program that could create a disruption. If you're going to be using real-time captioning or interpretation, allow those individuals early access so that you can pin their screens. assign them accordingly, and ensure that their technology is also properly working so that when participants of your meeting, conference, or event log in, they're able to utilize those services as needed. And then make sure that you're also starting and ending the meeting on time to remain cognizant of the agenda and time durations you've already sent out to participants. Some tips for presenters during the event are turning on automated captioning in Zoom by default. This can help with comprehension for a wide range of people and situations. Asking participants to raise their hands and say their names before they start speaking. If you've attended one of our presentations where we have more than one speaker, you may notice that we'll often say, "This is Lauren speaking," as we transition back and forth. This helps individuals to follow along regardless of their abilities, limitations, or location. You want to address remote participants by name to keep them connected with the individuals who are attending in person if you are hosting in a hybrid format. And as I said earlier, providing that 10-second pause after questions. This allows time for participant response. If a question or a comment is made during an interactive event, the host or speaker should, like I said earlier, repeat this content into a microphone or repeat it in general in case other individuals were unable to hear it. They want to make sure they repeat this before they answer or respond to that comment. It can also be useful to use the chat feature, like in today, using the Q&A, to submit questions when somebody's engaging in a virtual format so that they have various options for communication and access of any questions or comments that may arise during a presentation. And then lastly, for some tips during the event is that room setup. So I talked earlier about making sure that we have microphones in place, webcams oriented. You want to set up the room camera so that the individuals who are joining the meeting remotely can see all of the in-person participants. Similarly, displaying the remote participants on a screen, such as a projector, so that they're more easily seen from those attending in person. This allows everyone the opportunity to view one another and have that same access of understanding how many people are attending. And then rearranging the gallery view of participants on the projector screen to prioritize the videos of remote participants. So these are just some initial tips for in-person events or hybrid and remote events that people can start incorporating into their practice to increase accessibility. But there are plenty of other ways that you can continue with providing access to individuals' needs. So I really encourage that everyone check out the links that are provided. I'm going to switch to this next slide. So for more information on those other resources, access materials, or ITS related trainings, please select the links that are on this page for more information. They'll help provide content on crafting accessible documents, flyers, branded PowerPoint templates. They also have a lot of best practices for meetings and events that are occurring in person, hybrid, or remote. So with that, I will go back to our questions slide. That is the end of the content for Accessible Event Planning Part 2. If anyone has any questions. Not hearing about any other questions, so I'll go through some of our Disability Equity Office resources first. If any questions come up, again, feel free to put those in the Q&A for our moderators. They can either respond to those live in the chat or read aloud. So I'm going to revisit this. If you did not log on initially, I had this slide up at the very beginning before the presentation started. This is a QR code and a link to the upcoming events page for the Disability Equity Office. It shows our upcoming presentations and interactive workshops. So you can either scan the code or click on the link. It'll take you to that registration. Do know that if you register, but you later are unable to attend that event, you will still be sent the recording and the presentation materials afterwards. So I encourage that you register if it's a topic that you're interested in or that's applicable to you. We also have here a screenshot of the ADA's initial contact form for our office. Please feel free. We have it linked here too to utilize this if you ever want to contact our office for a workplace accommodation, hiring process accommodations, a consultation to ask questions regarding accessibility and accommodations. This is also where you would go to request ASL and CART services and a number of different resources on our campus. A similar screenshot is on this slide, and this is where you can request a training or a workshop. So we have a number of workshops like today that can be requested, and some that we have gone over that we kind of recurringly present throughout the year. So you can select if you are wanting it for your department, if you want us to come out or provide a workshop like this one during a lunch and learn. We have some topics listed on this slide that we often do throughout the year, such as ableism awareness, creating inclusive environments, disability awareness, reasonable accommodations in the interactive process. And then the last slide that has a screenshot very similar to the last one. This is the same form that you would be using. So requesting a training also uses the same form as the report a barrier to access. So if you come across an inoperable door opener or elevator, cracked pavement that's causing tripping hazards or inaccessibility for those using mobility devices, please feel free to submit those through this form. That allows our office to help intervene and get that information. We don't access all of our campus at all times, so it's really helpful for you all as the community to report those so that we're aware of where these exist and how we can assist. I'm going to pause again real quick before we get to the end of time. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns coming through?
Hi, Lauren. This is Erin. We don't have any open questions in our Q&A.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. And I'll just go over our last few slides then that we have at the end for anyone who's interested. We do have the voluntary self-identification for disabilities. You can update this through Wolverine Access. Updating your voluntary self-ID information plays a pivotal role in creating inclusive workspaces. It helps to provide a better understanding of the diversity of our organization and helps identify opportunities for improvement. You can click on Employee Self-Service, go to Campus Personnel Information, and then select Disability Status if you are interested in doing so. This information is used to measure the university's commitment to accessibility and is never shared with supervisors. And then the last slide with resources is more learning opportunities from the Disability Equity Office. So we have a filterable list of resources on the ECRT website, a link to our YouTube channel where our past recorded presentations will be linked for you to access. We have the Happening at Michigan event list that shows our upcoming presentations and workshops, recorded presentations and trainings. And then we encourage, please sign up for our Disability Equity Office newsletter where you can get updates throughout the year of things going on campus and in our community. But if there are no further questions, I just want to thank you all for attending. And as I stated earlier, this presentation and the slides will be sent out in the days following so that you have the opportunity to review this at a later time if that is best for your needs. But thank you for coming and attending part 2 of the accessible event planning series.